There is a place on Earth where rain has not fallen in over 500 years. Not a single drop. In some parts of this land, there has never been rain. Not in recorded history. Not ever. And yet, life exists here. Strange life, ancient life, life that should not be possible. This is the driest place on our planet, drier than the Sahara, drier than Death Valley, almost as dry as Mars. This is the Atacama. A 600-mile stretch of land along the Pacific coast of Chile. Older than the Sahara, older than the Gobi, older perhaps than any desert humans have ever named. For at least 15 million years, this ground has been drying, slowly, continuously, without pause. And here is what makes no sense. NASA studies it because it's the closest thing on Earth to the surface of Mars. Astronomers built their largest telescope here because the air is so dry, the stars look closer. And yet, in this same place, where rain forgets to fall, where soil resembles another planet, people live. Not just survive, they live. They have lived here for over 9,000 years. How? In a land that should be empty, where life should not exist, how do humans, animals, and plants endure? What does it take to call this place home? And what happens when the driest place on Earth starts to change? To understand why this place exists, you have to look at where it sits. Pressed against the Pacific Ocean on one side, trapped beneath the Andes Mountains on the other. A narrow strip of Earth squeezed between two giants. And in that squeeze, something strange happens. The Andes, some of the tallest mountains on the planet, block every drop of moisture trying to cross from the Amazon rainforest in the east. Anything that flies west toward the Pacific falls before it ever reaches the desert. The other side should bring rain. The Pacific Ocean is right there. Endless water, endless humidity. But it doesn't. A current rises from the depths of the sea, cold, dark, born thousands of miles south near Antarctica. They call it the Humboldt. And when this cold water meets warm tropical air, something invisible happens. The air refuses to rise. It refuses to form clouds. It refuses to release rain. This is called a thermal inversion, and the Atacama lives inside one every single day for 15 million years. The result is a landscape that doesn't behave like Earth. Salt flats stretching for over 4,000 square miles, formed not by ancient seas, but by minerals brought up through the ground over millions of years. Rocks shaped like nothing else on the planet. Not by wind, not by water, by time alone. Volcanoes rising more than 19,000 feet, over 5,800 meters, cones of perfect symmetry, half covered in ice that should not exist this close to the equator. And below it all, a soil so dry, so devoid of organic matter, so bombarded by ultraviolet radiation, that NASA's Viking instruments, the ones designed to find life on Mars, couldn't even detect life here. Think about that. Equipment built to search for life on another planet came to the Atacama and found nothing. But they were wrong. Life is here. It just doesn't live where we expected. It lives deeper, smaller, in ways we are only beginning to understand. And to find it, you have to leave the surface behind.
Beneath the surface, hidden inside grains of salt, they exist. Microbes, bacteria, single-celled organisms that have learned to survive without rain, without soil as we know it, without anything Earth's other life forms would consider survivable. Scientists call them extremophiles, life that thrives at the edge. In the Atacama, some of these microbes have been trapped inside salt crystals for thousands of years, dormant, waiting. The moment a single drop of moisture reaches them, from morning fog, from a passing cloud, they wake up, they feed, they reproduce, and then they sleep again. For decades, for centuries, for longer than human history. This is the closest thing on our planet to what life on Mars could look like. Above the soil, the impossible continues. Cacti grow here, but not where you'd expect. The Copiapoa cactus survives in places where no rain falls at all. It doesn't pull water from the ground, it pulls it from the air. From the Camanchaca, the dense coastal fog that drifts in from the Pacific each morning, clings to its spines, and condenses into droplets the plant slowly absorbs. A plant drinking from clouds. Some of these cacti are over 1,000 years old. They grew before Europeans crossed the Atlantic, before Genghis Khan, before the fall of Rome. And in the higher altitudes, where the desert meets the Andes, life takes another form. Yareta, a plant that looks like green stone. It grows just 1 centimeter per year, less than half an inch. The largest specimens are over 3,000 years old, older than the pyramids of Giza. Still alive, still growing. You could touch a yareta and be touching something that began its life when Egypt was still building its dynasties. But the most striking life of all is what walks, swims, and flies. In the salt lagoons of the high desert, 3 species of flamingos gather: the Andean, the Chilean, the Jameses. They feed on tiny crustaceans that exist only in this hypersaline water. Water so dense with minerals, it would kill almost any other animal. The flamingos turn pink because of these crustaceans. Their entire color comes from a food chain that exists only in the most extreme corners of the Atacama. Vicuñas, relatives of the llama,
Graze on grasses that grow at 14,000 feet, where oxygen is 1/3 less than at sea level. Andean foxes hunt at dawn, drinking morning dew off rocks, surviving on water that doesn't exist as a liquid more than a few hours each day. This is not a dead world. It is a world that has learned to wait. A world where every species, from the microbe in the salt crystal to the cactus drinking fog to the flamingo in the burning lagoon, has spent millions of years figuring out how to extract life from a place that gives almost nothing. And then there are the humans.
9,000 years ago, when most of the world was still figuring out agriculture, people were already living here. In a desert that should have killed them. Along the coast, a civilization called the Chinchorro emerged. They built no cities, they left no written language, but they did something no one else on Earth was doing at the time. They mummified their dead. 2,000 years before the Egyptians, long before the pharaohs, before the pyramids of Giza were even imagined. The Chinchorro mummies are the oldest artificial mummies ever discovered on this planet. And they exist because the Atacama itself preserved them. Its dryness, its salt, its silence. Further inland, other civilizations carved their stories into the desert floor. Geoglyphs, massive figures etched into the earth. Humans, animals, geometric shapes, some over 100 feet long. The Atacama giant alone is taller than a 10-story building. These weren't drawn for the people who walked beside them. They were drawn for the sky, for something or someone looking down. The descendants of these civilizations still live here. The Atacameño people, the Aymara, communities scattered across oases and mountain villages, growing crops in soil that has no business growing anything, drawing water from underground rivers that have been flowing in darkness for centuries. To survive in the Atacama, every generation had to learn what the desert allowed, and what it never would. In the 20th century, a different kind of explorer arrived. NASA. The space agency began using the Atacama as the most accurate Earth-based simulation of Mars. The reasons were obvious: the soil chemistry, the radiation levels, the total absence of organic decay, the endless dryness. If a piece of equipment couldn't survive the Atacama, it had no chance of surviving the Martian surface. Rovers, drilling instruments, life detection systems, the technology that traveled to Mars on the Curiosity, Perseverance, and InSight missions was tested here first. In a way, the Atacama is where humanity rehearses for other planets. But the desert offers something else too. A view of the universe almost no other place on Earth can match. At over 16,000 feet of altitude, on the Chajnantor Plateau, sits the largest astronomical observatory in the world. ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array. 66 radio telescopes spread across the high desert, listening to signals from the beginning of time. Looking back over 13 billion years. Watching galaxies form. Detecting molecules in clouds light years away.
The reason Alma is here, and not somewhere else, comes down to one fact. The air above the Atacama is so dry, so still, so undisturbed by water vapor that signals from deep space arrive almost untouched. And this is the strange truth of the Atacama. In the same place where life has spent millions of years adapting to almost no water, humanity has built the clearest window we have ever had into the universe. A desert that preserves the dead. A desert that prepares us for Mars. A desert that lets us see the birth of stars. There is something almost spiritual about it, as if every extreme on this planet has gathered in one place and quietly invited us to look closer. Places like this, they shouldn't exist, but they do, and we keep finding them. But the Atacama is changing, and not in ways anyone expected. March 25th, 2015. For the first time in recorded history, water fell from the sky over central Atacama in volumes the desert had never absorbed. Not millimeters, inches. In hours, rivers that had been dry for thousands of years filled. Mud flows swept through towns. Streets that hadn't seen rain in over a century turned into channels of brown water carrying everything in their path. Over 100 people died. 4 years later, in 2019, it happened again. Then in 2025. Each time, scientists noted something they had not expected to see in their lifetimes. The Atacama was being rained on. Climate models had predicted that the world's deserts would become drier as global temperatures rose. The Atacama was the exception. Researchers tracking sea surface temperatures in the Pacific began to see a pattern. Warmer waters were destabilizing the cold Humboldt Current. The thermal inversion that had kept this land dry for 15 million years was beginning to wobble. Not break, wobble. But in a place where the entire ecosystem evolved around the absence of rain, even small wobbles have consequences. There is a phenomenon here called the desierto florido, the flowering desert. Every few years, when conditions are exactly right, dormant seeds, buried for a decade or more, begin to germinate. The desert turns purple, pink, yellow. Entire valleys covered in flowers that no one alive had seen there before. It is one of the most beautiful natural events on this planet. And it is happening more often than it used to. Scientists initially celebrated. A flowering desert is, on the surface, a positive thing. Color, life, diversity. But the Atacama's life had spent 15 million years adapting to dryness. The microbes in the salt crystals, the cacti drinking fog, the lichens clinging to rocks. None of them evolved to survive in moisture. When unexpected rain comes, it kills as much as it gives. There is another change, one that doesn't come from the sky. Beneath the Salar de Atacama lies the largest known reserve of lithium on Earth. The metal that powers our phones, our laptops, our electric vehicles, our future. Mining operations now extract this lithium by pumping ancient brine, salt water that has been sitting underground for tens of thousands of years, to the surface. Vast evaporation pools, stretching for miles, glow turquoise in satellite images. They are visible from space. The water that fed the desert ecosystems for millennia is being drawn down. The flamingos at Laguna Chaxa now have less food. The Atacameño communities who farmed this land for 9,000 years now have less water in their wells. The microbes in the salt crystals are losing the very substrate they evolved inside of. For the first time in 15 million years, the Atacama is being changed faster than it can adapt. And here is the question no one wants to ask. What happens to a place that has spent so long perfecting one way of being when that way starts to disappear? The Atacama has existed for 15 million years. We have been here for less than 200,000. To this desert, our entire history is a single inhalation. Civilizations rise and fall, empires grow and disappear. We invent fire, we split atoms, we send machines to other planets, and the Atacama just keeps doing what it has always done. Drying, waiting, existing. But for the first time in its history, something has changed. Not the wind, not the ocean, not the rocks. Us. Our fingerprints are on the rain that falls now where rain never fell, on the flowers that bloom where flowers had no business blooming, on the water tables that drop year after year, pumped to the surface for batteries we will throw away in a decade. The most patient place on Earth is being interrupted by the most impatient species the planet has ever produced. And yet, there is something in the Atacama that resists this. The salt crystals are still there. The microbes are still dormant inside them. The Copiapoa cactus still drinks from morning fog. The flamingos still gather in their hypersaline lagoons. The yaretas still grow their 1 centimeter per year. The desert has not given up. It has simply continued, quietly, ancient, indifferent, as it always has. There is a kind of comfort in that. Not the comfort of permanence, the comfort of perspective. Standing in the Atacama, watching the sun rise over rock formations older than every story humans have ever told, it becomes harder to believe that anything we do is truly final. We will not destroy this desert. We will only change our relationship with it. And maybe that is what the Atacama has been teaching the people who live here for 9,000 years. The ones who knew, long before we built telescopes or sent rovers to Mars, that this land does not negotiate. You learn to live with what it allows. You let go of what it doesn't. This is the Atacama, the driest place on Earth, the closest place to Mars, the clearest window into the universe, the oldest desert that still breathes. And it is just one of them. There are places like this all over our planet, places that don't make sense, places that shouldn't exist. We document them, one by one. There are over 1,000 places on Earth that defy what we thought possible. Deserts that turn into oceans, forests that bloom underwater, mountains that erupt with cold instead of fire, islands no human is allowed to step on, towns where the sun does not rise for months at a time. Each one of them has a story. Each one of them is being changed by us, faster than they were ever meant to change. We will visit them all, one by one, place by place, story by story. If you want to come with us, subscribe. New documentary every week. And before you go, we want to know, of every place on Earth, every desert, every ocean, every frozen corner of the world, which one would you actually want to stand in? Where would you go if you could go anywhere? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. Until next time, thank you for watching.